Many of us have woken up this morning to the stunning news out of New Mexico that actor Gene Hackman has died at the age of 95. He died alongside his wife, Betsy Arakawa, and their dog as well. It's not clear what happened. The sheriff's office in that U.S. state investigating. No foul play is all we're being told at this time, but it is prompting many people to think back at the work of Gene Hackman, and it is an extensive catalog of work. And it comes on a day that Jason Gorber was in studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, Gene Hackman. Look, I think we talk all the time about how the films of the 1970s are sort of, in many ways, the peak of the sort of independent vibe, all the stuff. I mean, even today, we're all constantly referencing that period of film. And a huge, huge reason that many of those films are so extraordinary and so beloved to this day, things like French Connection, things like The Conversation, are because of somebody like Gene Hackman. He is absolutely one of those performers that would just show up and just make everything better. He had a very particular level of gravitas, a level of detachment. The closest I can think of is somebody like a Jack Nicholson that became iconic. But as much as I love Nicholson, and I love Nicholson deeply, it's Nicholson always is doing Nicholson. He was sort of the reluctant star. He was a writer, and that sort of came out of Gene Hackman was that person who was had a very iconic look and comportment, but would find himself chameleon-like inside a role. There wasn't a specific Gene Hackman role that we could just point to and say, this is what he would always do. And yet there was still a trademark element, a charisma, a gruffiness. I mean, as a former Marine, he brought a little bit of that gravitas. I just learned now his mom's from Sarnia. So
really?
So technically he could have had Canadian citizenship, but God bless. I think he's definitive. We'll give him New York. I mean, one of the other nerdy things I love this is that he was actually roommates with Dustin Hoffman. And Dustin Hoffman was just such a schmuck that he left, and then Dustin Hoffman went and lived with Robert Duvall. So you had and Pacino, he and Pacino lived together when they did a film. You have that generation of these, angry and hungry young actors in New York. It's a very, very New York thing, and it's that grittiness that transformed Hollywood as the star system started dying off in the late 60s, and Hollywood was looking for ways to deal with the fact that when the economy was rough, when everything was going down, people were looking for a little grittiness. In the middle of the Vietnam War, they looked for particular characters, not these sort of glamour characters, but something a little bit more real, something a little bit more the person that you'd walk into the bar and actually see sitting there like being a mess at the end of the bar.
Yeah,
that's who Gene Hackman could play. When you look at him in French Connection, there's a desiccation to his role, which is amazing. He seems like a spent individual. He's by no means the good guy. He is by definition an anti-heroic cop, and yet does so with like a believability, a humanity that he brings to these elements. He will absolutely be missed.
You speak about the range too. I mean, I think about just Mississippi Burning and then the Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah, Tenenbaums is amazing. Like if everybody who says they hate Wes Anderson, just watch Royal Tenenbaums. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. It's like one of those things. Like, this is an extraordinary film, and he's extraordinary. And again, exactly that. He's a guy that you don't necessarily love all the time, but you understand. You see where he's coming from. His boorishness.
And you can like the unlikable.
I love him in Young Frankenstein. He has this tiny little role in Young Frankenstein, and he shows up and he has this like sort of acerbic glint in his eye. He just made movies better. Yeah. And The Conversation, if there's one film to watch The Conversation that was sort of slipped in the middle of Coppola's like in ridiculous run in between the two Godfathers and before Apocalypse Now. And it's this incredibly well realized character, very insular, very, very remarkable. He will absolutely be missed.
Gene Hackman, dead at the age of 95. The sheriff's office in New Mexico investigating what happened. He was found dead during a welfare check alongside his wife and dog. No foul play expected. It will reverberate through Hollywood, as is the death of somebody at a very different end of the age spectrum. Actress Michelle Trachtenberg, who many people will know from Buffy and Gossip Girl, who died at the age of 39. No clear sign of what happened there either. But Jason, I will turn the page here and talk about what you originally came here to talk about, and that is something that was first explored in a documentary about a group of commercial divers back in 2012. They were trapped hundreds of meters under the sea, just 5 minutes of oxygen, and yet no chance of rescue for half an hour. It is a story being told in an adventure thriller now. Take me through it.
Yeah, so it's Last Breath. Ironic. I'm going on a scuba trip next week.
Are you?
So I'm a big scuba nerd. Last Breath, the fiction film, is fascinating for one specific reason, that it's one of the same filmmakers, the director Alex Parkinson, directed the documentary. And I watched the fiction film and I thought, man, they're doing a lot of weird sort of Hollywood stuff that they've sort of expanded upon the story. Then I watched the documentary and I'm like, oh, the same guy told the better story in the documentary. It is fascinating to me when they take docs and make feature films, and people ask questions like, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
Why don't you just watch the doc? Because unfortunately, people will go to a fiction film,
to the adventure thriller, more
correct,
than they'll go to the doc.
with Woody Harrelson, with Simu Liu, with like all of this stuff is there. So I get it. It's the same question that we've had before. Like, why is Disney making quote unquote live action versions of their animated classics? Because they make billions of dollars.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that Last Breath has unbelievably good underwater photography and has elements drawn directly from the documentary into the fiction film. So as a straight up adventure movie, if you turn off your brain and kind of accept it as like a Hollywood style disaster movie and know it's based on a true story, you'll have a lot of fun with it. But I firmly and strongly recommend people actually seek out the original documentary and actually compare the two. See what Hollywoodization has been incorporated.
This is the question. And when you say Hollywoodization, I will put it a different way as a journalist. How close to the truth does the feature film version of this stick compared to the documentary?
I don't know. Cowardice is a hard word. Okay. It is not believing in an audience that can accept that as bad as things got in real life, they didn't have to make it worse in a film to add more adventure. It was pretty bad showing off of what happened in the documentary, but they up everything. Suddenly, instead of one incident, we have 3 or 4 incidents, so that every 10 minutes we have a new level of anxiety. We can't just have the low-level dread that the documentary brilliantly sort of articulates. In other words, it's not just that there's, the rocket is crashed, it's that the rocket has crashed and the planet is splitting apart and the sun is about to explode. It's this kind of upmanship that fiction films tend to have in order to sate audience expectations. I believe there's some extraordinary examples. I think of Werner Herzog and his Rescue Dawn, where the same filmmaker made a documentary and then made the fiction film that can absolutely speak to one another. This is a good example of a film which is fun and frivolous, but actually a really remarkable story, much less cloying, much less manipulative in documentary form than it is as the fiction film.
Jason Gorber, thank you so much for coming in.
All the best. Jason
Gorber is Metro Morning's movie columnist and the editor-in-chief at thatshelf.com.
That shelf.